Books make you hope. Books make you dream. Books make you laugh. Books make you scream. This is the Books That Make You show, discussing books with authors and experts, unraveling the inner pages of all the books that help make us who we are.
Welcome, one and all. It is time for the Books That Make You show. And I'm your host, Desiree Duffy. And we're talking about ways humans can write better on today's Books That Make You show, especially in the age of advancing artificial intelligence. This is in many ways part 2 to the episode about the impact of AI on the writing and reading community. It was only a couple of months ago that we did that episode. In terms of this technology, that was eons ago. But there is something very timeless about writing that I believe will never be outpaced by machines. And that is indeed the very important topic that we're going to delve deeper into today. Ways that humans can write more, well, humanly, write better. And with me for this very unique conversation is somebody who is behind the scenes of every Books That Make You show, Dave Duffy. Dave serves as the head of the BookFest. It's a biannual, always free to attend literary event that captivates both readers and writers alike. Now, the BookFest is part of the Black Château Enterprises family of brands, and that's where he also heads operations for Black Château. That's a marketing and PR firm that specializes in authors and books, and as well for Books That Make You. In case you ever wondered about how all three of those brands work together, well, Dave is a part of the reason that they do work all seamlessly together. He spearheads the cross-functional literary experiences, event productions. He is a data expert at heart. He's good at leveraging quantitative analysis and informing strategies and promotional campaigns. And he does a lot of things that I can't even pronounce. The bottom line is his unique skill set sits him at this intersection where technology and operations and the future of the writing world, it enables him to deliver just unforgettable experiences. And he's really there thinking about and looking forward at the future of some of these very thought-provoking aspects of where LLMs, or large language models like ChatGPT, and some of the graphic creating software that's out there like Midjourney or DALL-E. These things are disrupting the industry at an alarming rate. And I am so glad that Dave is here to talk to us about it all. How you doing, Dave?
Fantastic. It's very different to be on the other side of the screen with you instead of editing it.
Right. So that's the thing. Dave's with us for every show. You just never see him. Once in a while, the guest on the show might see Dave off to the side, setting up the microphone or adjusting the lighting. So it really is fun to have you across from me and talking about this. Thank you for doing this.
You bet. It's an interesting topic.
Okay, so let's start. Let's dive right in. Because a lot of folks, and the reason we're doing this part 2, or one of the reasons, is I feel that a lot of people in the literary world, the reading community as well, writing communities, they're a little bit unsure. Maybe they're suspicious of AI. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think the general public are finally, with all the strikes and things going on, finally hearing about AI impacting people's lives. The big problem is, though, is I think the average person really doesn't use it or understand like what it's capable of, what it's not capable of, at least at this point in time. And so there's a lot of apprehension, I think, about it and about learning it. So yeah, I mean, it can always kind of be scary. There's a lot of people out there saying, you're going to lose your job, et cetera, et cetera. So I think there's a lot of shock around that. The other thing is, too, I think some of the apprehension about how some of these models have been trained and some of the liberties that companies have taken, with regardless of art or copy, text, et cetera, to basically train their models facial recognition, all kinds of stuff, voice pattern recognition. So that is very invasive. And I think the courts, especially in the US here, have a lot of ground to cover to get back up to speed where, things are in terms of like what actually entails, proprietary rights and, even like the right to your own face or voice. I mean, I don't think there's really any laws that cover that kind of, information at this point, but, that's going to happen quickly.
Yeah, that's definitely something for the lawyers to sort out. One of my favorite sayings that I bring up all the time is, I'm not a lawyer, because this just unpacks so many different IP issues and rights and privacy issues that we just never even thought of in these terms. So that's fascinating. And maybe we should at some point have an IP attorney or somebody on the show to unpack that. Right now, I want to get into, because I feel that humans can win at writing by being human. Any thoughts about the ways that humans are uniquely positioned to write because of the fact that they're humans?
Well, I think that regardless of like whether you're writing a fiction book or a nonfiction book or poetry, it's very much about what the author brings to the table and the storytelling that's involved with it. Someone said recently that, if you're writing a nonfiction book and AI can essentially write the book for you, then you're not bringing anything to the table. Like, it's not unique. There's no perspective. So that is really the distinguishing factor of what AI can turn out, especially right now, is that storytelling, that unique perspective of authors. But yeah, I mean, telling, unique stories and
I think too that one of the reasons that we read, and I'll lean over to the fiction side. Thank you for bringing up nonfiction, because that's true. Sometimes nonfiction, especially, it feels like it's very rote, very much the same information over and over again, just with a new spin or regurgitated.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to story, though, I feel that we have this agreement. There's a reader-writer agreement. When you're a reader, you expect to get a human experience. And I think, at least the way I look at it, is if that's not delivered, then it's a violation of that contract, that unwritten contract. We're not talking about something with those lawyers involved, but it's something where the reader would feel, I don't know, ripped off, misled. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And especially with fiction, I think that our core values as writers really comes through in the fiction that we're writing. And again, that's something that AI doesn't have. It's good at regurgitating or pushing you in a specific direction, but it's not good at understanding what your core values are or what your life experiences are and how you want to relate that and intertwine it into your storytelling.
Yeah, it gets very vanilla, very just predictable. Actually, I mean, I think you understand exactly how it works better, but it's predictive text. And I think sometimes people don't quite realize that as it's writing, as it's going, it's predicting because of all of these sources that it's pulled in, that it's using. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just kind of, it's just predicting what it thinks needs to be said. Like you're saying, it's not actually putting behind it any real human thought.
Right.
And on that note, I want to kind of segue a little bit over to this idea of flow. And when we write, we can get these surges of flow where the words just come tumbling out of us, where we just go and go and go. It's the opposite of writer's block. It's where you're just entering this flow state. It's something that you hear a lot of creatives talk about. And I feel that writers and other creatives can get there as well. Some of the things that matter are food, diet, exercise. I actually read a really great book, the book Beyond Coffee, A Sustainable Guide to Nootropics, Adaptogens, and Mushrooms. It goes into depth on this topic. And I do recommend, if anybody wants to check that out, you can find it on the Magic Mind website. You even get 2 chapters for free. But this whole idea of, opening up flow, I think is a really interesting way to do it. I even use it myself. It replaces not all of the coffee, Dave, but it replaces some of the coffee.
I don't think anything could replace the coffee.
Well, it is for it, and it takes that edge off. If you have too much coffee or even too much tea because of the caffeine, it just kind of gets you're not necessarily in that flow state. You're just amped up, but you're not necessarily focused. So I think focus is a big part of it. And, I just wanted to touch on Magic Mind because I've been taking it and I really love it. And it uses lion's mane mushrooms, and some of the ingredients, they're natural. Many of them are organic. And it just ties back into this whole idea of when we optimize our human bodies for their best performance and their best mental performance, then it seems like really wonderful creative things can happen. And I don't think the computers can ever really do that. They're just going to keep going at the rate they go because they're computers, right?
Exactly. It's just a filter that's really filtering text or images, pixel by pixel or word by word or character by character. But jumping back to that, how does it taste? Because I actually every day, like at least once a day, like I get to this point where I have plenty of energy, but my mind is just a little bit off. It's jumping around too much.
Yeah, that's the focus. That's the thing. So there's one thing when you have a lot of energy, but to be able to maximize it and focus it. So I love the taste, and I do keep it refrigerated. You don't have to. I think some people could add it to a smoothie or mix it with something. I actually don't mind the taste at all. I think it tastes kind of good. And again, I like the fact that it's got natural ingredients. I've been going down this rabbit hole of lion's mane mushrooms and just mushrooms in general, and a lot of different supplements that help with flow. And it's really exciting that you get this all in one handy dandy little shot. And I can kind of replace most of this or some of this. And I think too, that a lot of times folks, because we're busy, we as writers are generally doing this as a side job. It's our dream job, but we're also working. And so when we want to write, we've all had that situation where we want to write. I'm getting ready to write. I've blocked off this day for me to write. And then you sit there just staring at the page and nothing's flowing. So I think finding ways to enter that flow state is really important. I brought this up actually, and you know about this too. I brought it up on Twitter X the other day. I was just asking people, how do you get to your flow state? Because I was wondering, because there's different ways to do it. And I thought it was interesting. An RPG person, a gamer, she created or creates games. She talked about how when she's testing role-playing games, that helps her to kind of think on her feet. And somebody else mentioned driving. And I've had that happen before. We're driving in a car. Just, I don't know, something about that, doing an activity that is a little bit mindless helps the brain focus. I don't know if you've done anything to...
I would say, yeah, which is it's super irritating because you're driving on a trip or something, and then all of a sudden you're super focused and like you're wasting that time that you're focused sitting in a car instead of being able to be, writing or doing some projects. So yeah, that's very frustrating. But absolutely, yeah, I'll have to give that a try because, I said it happens to me at least once a day. So
yeah. I think meditation is another way that people can find that flow. And we've all heard of, and I do yoga, but I'm not like meditating. I'm stretching and getting some exercise in there. But I think that one of the things folks can do if they're a writer or a creative of any sort, is find your flow places, whether it's something like Magic Mind, maybe it is a little bit of coffee and green tea, maybe it's driving, maybe it's meditation. There's some other supplements that are out on the market too, so I don't want to go too deep down that rabbit hole. But I think that by perfecting our performance and maximizing our physical bodies and our performance, our outputs are going to always be better, or at least on par with what that computer, with what that AI can put out there.
Well, and especially if you have your time scheduled, and if you can just drink something to help you get into that place before your scheduled time comes up to write. I mean, that's fantastic.
Yeah. It's almost like you plan it. It's like, okay, at 10 o'clock today, I'm going to put this down, and pick this up, and I'm going to go into my flow state.
Right. Yeah, that's terrific.
Now, about AI replacing writers, because I think that's the thing that a lot of folks are afraid of. And you mentioned the writer strikes earlier. I think that was one of the big fears, is that writers' positions, and maybe, we can argue this, maybe it's not necessarily the top writers or the big names, but a lot of times there's people that come on board, they're in a writer's room within the entertainment world, working on TV shows and what have you. And if you can skirt corners and get the writing process done faster, that those jobs are going to be replaced. Artists as well, I think, have this fear. What are your thoughts, Dave? Is AI going to replace writers and creatives?
So my perspective, like on all of AI, regardless of like what, segment of like industry is, popping into, is that it seems, at least at this point, it's really about getting from a starting point, like a dead stop, into a full run faster, and ending up with a much better product at the end for the same amount of costs. So it's really good at, getting from like a concept or even creating concepts. Like you might have a rough idea, but then really drilling into that and getting a lot of potential concepts out of it very quickly to really narrow down like what's going to work best. Also for research, and whether you're researching what type of book you should write or what your marketplace is for a specific type of book, that's all extremely useful. So again, I think what we're going to find is we're going to have, books, television shows, etc., that are just much more engaging, and being able to be produced with, much smaller, well, not much smaller budgets, but yes, smaller budgets, and much more quickly as well. So I think it's, in general, I think it's a very good thing, whether you're an artist or a writer, or, doesn't matter, accountant.
Oh, the accountants are loving this, I bet, right?
Yes. So.
Well, I see where you're going as far as this creating a more equal or level playing field. And it always reminds me, I brought this up before when I've done talks and stuff, but it just reminds me of in the early days of Napster and the music industry, and when people really started to understand what the internet was, and that you could do things called file sharing. And that file sharing meant that your music didn't have to exist outside of your computer, and people were sharing. And it disrupted the music industry. And I'm not saying, right or wrong in that area, because there's a lot of musicians and record companies that lost money. But at the same time, once people realized they could get their music out there, and they started doing it, much like writers discovering, hey, I can self-publish my book. I don't have to use the big publishers. I see AI as possibly giving folks who just didn't have the means, the resources, the money, the time, the ability to get there a little faster.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of the birth of Pandora and so on, right? So, I mean, all these musicians that, couldn't afford to get their music published or couldn't get a record deal suddenly could just put their music on Pandora and grow a following of listeners, and it opens, way up, which is fantastic.
I keep my finger as much as I can on the pulse of AI and what's coming in. I feel that every day there's somebody's coming out with a new version of something. They've improved this model. There's been some disruption at ChatGPT with leadership. There's just always something happening. It's really hard to keep up. And after a while, I can see the average person or even the average reader or writer just getting numb to it and not really keeping their finger on the pulse of what's coming down the pike. What do you think we should be focused on? What do you think is coming that people should stop and take note of?
So for authors, I mean, right now, the way the industry is set up is that you really, to get the full value or potential out of AI, you really need to understand code and systems and networks. That's going to go away. Microsoft and Google and, all these small companies are popping up and with creative ways to, help you reduce time, really is what it boils down to, and be able to do things creatively and specific to what you're doing without having to code and understand all this, technical stuff. So I think that's fantastic. One of the things that, I always hear like authors, especially fiction authors, having conversations with their characters in their heads. But wouldn't it be cool if you could like easily train like AI models to like understand the characters in your book series and be able to fact check against it, or even if like you're having trouble, like you can bounce ideas off it. Would will my character's response be to this or that? And it gives you inspiration if you're in a funk to like just kind of like oh, I never thought of doing something along those lines. I mean, obviously, it's not going to give you exactly what you want, but it'll create enough variation in the question that you ask to be able to, inspire you to actually have a creative idea and go down a pathway. And I think that's the most important part so far.
I'm glad you brought up some of those examples because that's perfect. And it just underscores this idea. A lot of times I hear authors say, and again, it's because they might have heard about AI and they heard it's bad. They don't quite know why. They've never tried it themselves. Therefore, it's something they should never use.
Yeah.
But you can use AI in your writing in ways that's not just having it write for you, having it be the voice of your characters, or really dig into a historical time and kind of fact check you, or even just put in your writing and say, hey, how does this sound? It can help you with the editing process in many ways too, alleviating some of that need or some of the time it might take for you to go back and forth with a writing partner or with beta readers and folks where it's taking so long for you. It kind of bridges that gap.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, think of all those people that have like, 5-10 book series too, especially like fantasy authors and science fiction authors, and trying to keep track of like where everybody is and how long it takes to get from point A to point B. So you can have everybody that's supposed to be in a scene there, like all that kind of rote mechanics that don't really have anything to do with storytelling. Like that, those are things that can be done very easily and quickly with AI tools, which, I hope to see more of that in writing software coming out soon.
There is a lot of writing software that's adapting to it. So whether I tend to just use ChatGPT when I talk about almost all large language models. There's plenty of other ones out there. It's just the one that I happen to be familiar with. But there are, and I think that's the thing too that folks might not necessarily realize, is that artificial intelligence is being integrated into a lot of the software we automatically are using anyway. So to say I'm not using AI, it's like, well, wait a second. Is it already in your Microsoft Outlook account? Is it in your WordPress website? It's being integrated in ways that we're not even necessarily aware of.
Yeah, or Expedia or whatever. I mean, just maybe looking at what hotels you have booked and, suggesting hotels based on your previous bookings and like all kinds of like integrations that you wouldn't even really necessarily think to know that like it's involved in some capacity.
I'm excited too about some of the wearables that are out there. I'm pointing at my glasses. No, these are not AI glasses, but I think those look cool. And the rabbit, the little portables, and some of the wearables that are coming out. I think it really is going to be an exciting time, not just for writers and readers, but for everybody in the world. One thing I want us to touch on a little bit deeper, if you can indulge me, is art and illustrations, and even book cover design, because when it comes to the art and Midjourney, DALL-E, some of these artistic platforms, and the fact that they're deriving a lot of the art. Can you talk about that and maybe unpack that a little bit for us?
Yeah, so unlike a lot of people out there in the art world, I was extremely excited to see when it was coming out, for a couple of reasons. So I have a background in photography as well, and a lot of the things you do, in photography in terms of editing and, whether it's removing things or putting people on different backgrounds, compositing and things like that, that's a lot of work. I don't think people realize how much time that takes. They're just like, oh yeah, just put it in Photoshop. But depending upon how the image was created and what the backgrounds are, it's a very complex process. Not to mention, even just doing advertising or thumbnails for the YouTube shows that we do here on Books That Make You. You can't always find the picture that you want, if that makes sense. So even looking at creative farms where they have all these different images to license, like you may just not find what you need. So having the ability to just go prompt something and have it spit out a bunch of different options is fantastic. And not only that, but when it comes to like designing book covers, again, going back to what I said in the beginning about getting from point A to point B faster with a higher quality output at the end, a lot of people, authors included, don't really understand, concepts, like a sketch. So, you talk to an artist, they give you a sketch of what the book cover idea is. Like they have a hard time sometimes seeing what the end result is. And with AI, you can just do a lot of cutting and pasting and, cropping stuff out, but you can give a more fleshed out, completed image to show them where you want to go. And then that just by far, has a higher impact and just makes things move so much faster. And then, once you have that, concept down and done, which, takes half the time, you can just go and, license all the images, hire an illustrator, whatever you want to do, and get the final artwork done. And much better product generally at the end and getting there faster and cheaper.
I think every author, anybody who's done any kind of business usually whatsoever, might have worked with an artist or somebody who's trying to make those concepts, like you're saying, has experienced that where I can see it in my head. I see the cover and I want this and that. But when you start describing it just, that poor artist is sitting there struggling. And if they have something kind of stuck in their head and they can't get rid of it, it can be a real frustrating process. And I think you're right. You're not necessarily using Midjourney or DALL-E or what have you to replace the graphic designer. You're giving them the concept more efficiently and succinctly and matching your vision more than what might happen if you're just relying on somebody to capture that thing that you can see in your mind's eye so clearly. I want to talk a little bit too, since we've touched on it, Adobe, for example. And I'm not necessarily saying Adobe because it's kind of like ChatGPT. It's just one of the software that I happen to use, but they are actually extrapolating or using the art that they use in their AI. Correct me if I'm wrong, or maybe help me explain it, but they're licensing that already. So it's not as if the artists behind it aren't getting paid.
Kind of. They're not licensing it, but what they're doing is much more ethical by most people's standards than like say ChatGPT or DALL-E. What they're doing is they have a cloud-based system, and they have specific plugins within Photoshop. So if you use those plugins, you're essentially giving them permission to train their models on them, because they have to be, your image has to be uploaded to their server in the background and then processed, and then you get it back down. So they're using it from artists who specifically use their, Adobe products to basically train their system. And the cool thing too about Adobe is that when you do use their AI generative information, say in Photoshop, like it actually puts that in the metadata. So it's public information when you put that art out. Like it tells people that, yes, you use some kind of AI generative context, to create this, which again isn't a bad thing. I mean, it could be that, you're removing flyaways from somebody's head, or you're, changing the car in the background of an, it doesn't have to be, groundbreaking, everything from scratch is, AI created, but to have AI tools that can do that kind of stuff is a huge time saver for artists and just massively accelerates the art, timelines.
I think it's kind of funny because the picture that you see behind me, I always do a chalkboard wall. It's usually of the book cover of the author we have on, but in this case, I didn't necessarily have a book cover. So this is actually me drawing a graphic that was created by Midjourney. So in a very meta turn of events, here's me, the flesh and blood, copying the AI artist to create something. That was kind of fun.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Okay, I want to touch really quick because we're heading the clock right now. Writing as a business, that's really important too. And that's another thing that maybe some authorpreneurs don't necessarily think about when they're considering using AI tools. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, keep an eye out. Whether you're an Apple user and you use Google, or you're a PC user and use Microsoft, or maybe you use Microsoft on Apple. These companies are coming out with tools every couple of months that just integrate into their current software, but they're new features. So definitely keep an eye on that. There's a lot of great stuff coming and that's already out to help you be more efficient with your time and automate different aspects of your workflow not related to writing at all. So.
Oh, yeah. And that's the thing. If you can save time in other areas of your life too, then that gives you more time for writing and reading.
Exactly.
Yeah. Dave Duffy, my partner in business, my partner in life, my partner in a lot of things that we're not going to get into right now. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Books That Make You show.
Thank you. It was great being here.
It was a lot of fun. Really, it was. And thank you, everybody, for being with us as well. Please make sure you go to our website, booksthatmakeyou.com, and that is where you can sign up for our Webby Award-winning newsletter. Now, if you want to explore more topics about AI, there's past shows on the Books That Make You show that you can check out. As well, I encourage you to check out the BookFest and sign up to be a BookFester. That's thebookfest.com. And there you can find different panels and conversations that we've had in the past. And I have a feeling we're going to continue to have those conversations too about artificial intelligence and its impact on the reading and writing communities. As well, you can always sign up for the Black Château newsletter. Just go to blackchateauenterprises.com as well. That's a good resource for writers and people in the literary world. Until next time, all of my bookish buddies, please do me one favor, and that is enjoy all of the books that make you exactly who you are.
The host and executive producer of the Books That Make You show is Desiree Duffy. Sound mastering and engineering by Dave Napox. Social media and content promotion by Siddhi Jahagirdar. Copywriting and editing by Mike Robinson. The Books That Make You show is an award-winning podcast produced by Black Château Enterprises.